Change is coming for millions of gig workers who could qualify under a new Biden administration rule, making it harder for companies to classify workers as independent contractors instead of employees. Now, that goes into effect in March. Now, in tandem, the Labor Department also rescinding a Trump-era rule today that had broadened the classification of independent contractors. The revamped rule means easier access to benefits, protections, overtime, higher wages, and more. So how will companies that rely on independent contractors and gig workers, like your Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and others, offset these added costs? Let's bring in Michael Bernick, Duane Morris LLP employment attorney and former California Labor Department director, to discuss more. Welcome back to the show here. So for people who are seeing these announcements crossing today, what should they be aware of as a gig worker as to how they should be navigating this?
Well, as you say, Rochelle, it is a process that'll take some time. First, it doesn't eliminate the gig economy. It merely changes the rules on how do you classify between gig economy workers and employees. And we've had this in California. We went through a similar process in California in 2019 with the passage of AB 5 that made it more difficult in our state to classify workers as independent contractors. So we have some experience, and what we find out is one that it's a company by company process. So it's not as if a whole category of independent contractors or app workers are changed. It's company by company. It takes time. And of course, the gig economy, an estimated 57 million workers, is so diverse. We often think of it in terms of the app-based workers, but they're a very small part of the independent contractors and this gig economy. So it'll take some time to play out, but you're right, it is a major change, and we've seen that in California.
And so obviously there was some pushback from some employers, even when the draft rule was first announced back in 2022, saying, look, we can't afford these added costs for these extra benefits. How did that play out in California?
Well, we have seen a diversity of responses. In some cases, workers have been moved from independent contractors or gig economy workers into employee status. In other cases, though, Rochelle, workers who are independent contractors found their positions eliminated. Employers or companies did say, we just can't afford if we have to move you into employee status. So it's had that diversity within and among employers. Some have been able to move people on. As I say, others have decided they just can't absorb the additional costs. So it really has split among sectors, among occupations.
And as you mentioned there, not just gig workers who have a high amount of independent contractors. You think construction, you think healthcare. If you're an investor and you're seeing some of these new rules come into place, then what should you be paying attention to? And what do you think perhaps is a good place to start looking at some of these companies beyond your Ubers and your DoorDashes?
Well, as you say, the Ubers and DoorDashes, the whole app-based, which we often think of in terms of the gig economy, is really less than 10%, of the gig economy workers. They're in construction, they're in trucking, they're in hairdressing and other fields. So it's diversity. I think the rule, as you point out, came out initially in October of 2022. Then there was a market response in terms of particularly Uber, Lyft, some of the app-based ones who saw their shares go down. On the other hand, I think now the market has recognize that this isn't going to have at least an immediate dramatic impact. And I would think that at least going forward in the next months, we won't see any dramatic change.
And Michael, in terms of the pros, as a worker, obviously your added benefits, higher wages, etc. But what about on the downside? Because one of the things that people liked about independent contracting was perhaps some of the flexibility. Are there any downsides that we should be aware of?
Well, a lot of upsides, but it's very interesting, Rochelle. We had hearings here in California throughout 2019 on the change in classification, which the so-called ABC test, which bears similarity to the Biden rules. And there are a lot of independent contractors, particularly in trucking, but a wide range of construction and other fields, who came out and said, we want to be independent contractors. A lot of the so-called creatives came out and said, we want to be independent contractors. Now, that may be false consciousness or some mistake on their part, but I don't think so. And it shows that I think within the independent contractor rule, the idea that all people want to move into employee status. Some certainly do. And for many, it's a positive thing. But there's a strong, significant core of current independent contractors who prefer to be that.
Indeed, because you see a lot of these people having sort of juggling multiple contracts at once, and I guess for them it wouldn't be to their benefit necessarily. Appreciate you breaking the data down. Michael Bernick, Duane Morris LLP employment attorney and former California Labor Department director. Thank you so much.